Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by...
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We are all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
And welcome back to our spooky season at Popcorn Psychology. So today we are talking about the 90s classic Scream. It came out in 96 with Drew Barrymore, Neve Campbell, Skeet Ulrich, Matthew Lillard, the whole bunch. The basic premise of Scream, it's a classic like slasher movie where Sydney, the main character, it's the year anniversary of her mother's death and sexual assault, and basically a bunch of kids or high schoolers at her high school start being serial killed by the ghost face killer, not just a rapper from the Wu-Tang Clan. And so today we're going to be talking about the character of Sydney and the concept of post-traumatic growth. We're also going to be talking about the two, spoiler alert, killers of this movie, Billy and Stu, and we're going to be talking about Folie Deux and antisocial personality disorder. And also conduct disorder as it relates to that. So let's jump into it. So Sydney, I almost said Sydney Bristow, which is the main character of the show Alias.
Good. Great show.
Great show. So Sydney, whose last name, Prescott. Sydney Prescott. Only because they say her dad's full name
like
8,000 times in this movie. And also, take a drink every time you hear cellular phone.
Oh my God.
Cellular phone or cellular be used in this movie.
On your cellular.
And it hurt my heart.
I felt embarrassed when they said it.
We looked up the numbers on his cellular phone. Why do you have a cellular phone, sir? Son?
And it took a day to get them? Like, what?
So... Sydney Prescott's our main. She's the final girl of this movie. And so we thought she'd be an interesting presentation of an idea that's called post-traumatic growth. So this is kind of like an inverted concept of like post-traumatic stress disorder, which I think most people are familiar with, which is the idea that when something traumatizing happens to you, that then you might get post-traumatic stress disorder, which is like... we very slightly can get into it, like nightmares, panic attacks, heightened anxiety, flashbacks to what happened, heightened fight or flight response, basically a lot of heightened stress responses. And so there's a newer concept, which is the idea of post-traumatic growth. And I'm going to throw it to you, Ben, for the definition of that.
So post-traumatic growth is defined as a benefit of psychological change experienced as a result of adversity and other challenges in order to rise to a higher level of functioning. In other words, after you have experienced some sort of growth and have reached a point where you have been able to move to a place where you can experience the trauma with a calm body and process it, in the words of the therapies I use, we reach a point where the trauma is processed, meaning when you think about it, it no longer throws you into a state where you are reactive to the traumatic stimuli anymore, and that you can remember it as a memory, and what happened is in the past. It does not feel like it's happening now, which is where your brain gets confused when you are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, is that not only did it happen then, but it's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Like the symptoms are happening now, not that it's necessarily happening again, but can be if you reach the point of having flashbacks, but you're still dealing with the symptoms. And post-traumatic growth is what you reach when you have found meaning and purpose from the struggles you have dealt with. It's a concept that is really based in the work done from the author of Man's Search for Meaning.
Okay. Man's Search for Meaning? Man's Search for Meaning.
The man's name just totally left my brain, which is at least the third time that's happened when we've talked about him. But when he wrote that book, he talked about the way to heal from trauma is to accept that suffering is part of the human condition, and the only thing that we can do to really advance from it is to make meaning of suffering and find a place for the pain and do something with it to grow from it, to change from it, and to better impact the world. And the idea of post-traumatic growth really comes from that after you have reached a point where you have processed it, that is no longer actively causing you to experience symptoms of distress, that you find something to do with it, like the people who lost a child to drunk driving and created MAD.
Mm-hmm. That's a good example.
Yeah, it is.
And now there's a massive organization bringing out about the message of fighting drunk driving, and the prosecution of DUIs has increased because of that.
Mm-hmm. So with Sydney, I think what kind of brought to my mind the idea of post-traumatic growth was that she is like portrayed as like wildly resilient in this movie.
Yes.
Like she is constantly being triggered, or like what would trigger someone. Like in the beginning of the movie, she turns on the TV and it's all news that's referencing her mom's death in very descriptive, flagrant language.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's just the regular way that news is reported, which is fear-mongering just in general. So we give all the most gruesome details of something that we don't necessarily need. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's like, and she's having like, obviously it's like making her sad. Like it's obviously causing an emotional response with her, because how could it not? But she's not like flipping out or having panic attacks or like shutting down. Like she's actually uses a lot of what I would consider coping skills. Like she turns the TV off, she kind of gets away from it. She calls her friend and asks for like some support. Like, can I be with you? Because her dad's out of town. And also when she gets, another thought that made me think of like more post-traumatic growth was that when she is confronted also with other scary things, like the very first time that the killer calls her and she thinks it's Randy, when she realizes that it's not Randy, or when she thinks she's being punked or played with, she like goes into the front patio and she's really confrontive, like appropriately confrontive with the person. Like really, I think I wrote, she's really ballsy is what I wrote in my notes. Like for someone, because I think stereotypically when we see things like this, when someone who's had such a big trauma like she had, where it sounds like she might have even found her mom's body.
I think she witnessed it happening.
No, because she thought
her get butchered, I thought.
No, because she came after the fact, because she thought it was Cotton Weary, but it wasn't. She saw him leave the house, or thought she did.
Okay.
She saw someone wearing his jacket.
Oh, right.
Which is probably Billy. But anyway, and so, but she, I lost a train of thought with that. So I guess in all these situations where it comes up for her again, I think typically in these kind of movies or in real life, you would see her like breaking down or like panicking or like really struggling to kind of pull herself together. Like, and in this movie, she's pretty high functioning. Like she's going to school fine. Like these people talk about it around her and she's not like breaking down or like freaking out. Like you could argue that maybe she's a little shut down, but she seems more like resilient. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think that it's obvious that she has been traumatized and that she operates differently in her world and a little more distant from it and sort of on a different plane than the other her friends and students. Like she operates in like a more serious, more reserved, a little bit more shut down, and like the way Neve Campbell acted, it was, you could see that she's always got something else on her mind than what's going on.
That's true. Yeah. And also very obviously more grown up than her friends. Like when you go through something really horrific and it distances you from your social group, your peer group, because you've just had to grow up a bit more.
You grew up a lot.
And also I would imagine too, like with having then a single dad, who also travels a lot for work, she probably is put in a very like almost like partner role with dad, where she probably does a lot of household stuff herself. She probably takes care of herself a lot. She probably also kind of takes care of him, where kids will incidentally fall into a more like spouse role with the remaining parent, and not for anyone's fault. It just happens.
And not like in a sexual way, but like as in like a partner, a life partner. I want to make sure specify that.
For sure.
Absolutely. People that haven't heard that term before might be confused that parents tried to sleep with their kids, and we definitely cover this a lot in our episode on Psycho.
Yes.
From 2 years ago.
So with her, it's probably just a lot of like what we'd call like parentifying, just like adulting. Like she probably just gets adulted a lot by her dad, incidentally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's accurate. And I just feel like her And maybe it's just her trauma response in general in terms of fight, but she very much is always like, prove it.
Yeah.
Like, I've been in a place where I've been scared before. Prove it to me that you're going to actually do something. And she gets up and runs and gets up and does whatever she can do to get away every single time. And she also, and I think the things that you pointed out, Brittany, I feel like are things that I really noticed, that in terms of someone seeing, like, especially it being the anniversary of her mother's murder, I feel like in some ways I would have expected her to maybe like tear up or to like to have to go cry, to kind of
take days off school.
Yeah, or like yell at her friends when they bring up stuff and all the joking that they do about the murders. And she doesn't. And I don't disagree that she might be a little bit shut down. Like, I don't think that that's wrong at all. But I do feel like her sense of self in terms of, I have to take care of myself and I can't wait for someone else to do that for me.
And her sexuality, yeah, I can't say that word right now. Sexuality is shut down.
Freudian slip.
I'm not sure how that was a Freudian slip. Sec. Yeah, her.
Well, I definitely think that is
her sexuality is shut down.
Yeah.
And that becomes a central theme to it. And we find out later on in the story that part of the reason why she feels like her sexuality is repressed is because she doesn't want to be associated with her mother, who was, by all accounts, out around the town.
Catting
around, being a whore. All these.
Jesus Christ.
That's what Billy says.
Billy also kills people, bro.
Yeah,
I'm not justifying what Billy says. I'm just saying what words are said in the film.
She had a reputation.
I do not agree with that, application. But that's what was said in the film. That's what she has thrust upon her, which creates a negative association with sex, which will make her feel like that is not something available to her without being associated with her mother and having all of her business put out all over the town and be like,
yeah,
you're just like your mother, or putting someone in a position where they may want to kill her.
I wonder too if it's also, I mean, I definitely agree with that. And also I think because her mom was raped, as they say blatantly many times in the movie, it does seem like sexuality with her is where her trauma has most been like pathologized, kind of like where it's most connected to her trauma. It's just that she's like shut down sexually.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting like working with her to try to figure out, like, does she not feel sexual? You know what I mean? Like, is her arousal shut down? Because if your mom was like brutally assaulted, you might just not be feeling sexy. You know what I mean? Like that, you might have a lot of scary feelings connected to sex. Or is it that you do feel it, but like you were saying, Ben, there's a lot of fear around sexuality. So you shut it down.
She feels it. Like she wants to be sexual. You see her kind of engaging with Billy, and then like going for, and like like allowing him to see her. Flash him and like.
I'm counteracting
that. You to counter me is fine, but let me talk
Finish
first.
up.
Damn, interrupting cow over here. Moo. But she's trying to embrace like the sexuality part of her that she feels comfortable with, and trying to set the limits on it of what she feels comfortable with, because she offers him like, well, would you settle for over the clothes stuff, or like, would you settle for a PG-13 relationship? And yes, I'm fully aware that there's manipulation going on and that he's pressuring her and there's all that stuff, but she's also trying to engage and negotiate with that situation and engage with it in a way in which she feels comfortable. And that is showing that I don't think that she's just fully repressing her sexuality. I think that she's struggling with trying to embrace feeling her emerging sexuality, but dealing with the way it's been implanted in her that it has such a negative connotation. Because what we also have to remember about Sydney is that not only are we seeing her a year after that, we're also seeing her after the court case, where she has heard all of that business. She's fully aware of the book that is being written by the reporter. She's heard all of the stuff on TV and the whole court case, to the point that the court case has been now into appeals, which for a murder case to be into appeals within a year is bananas. Mm-hmm. But that's where we are in the story. So you can't factor out all that information, that all of that negativity that would have come out in the courtroom by the defense attorneys that would have been trying to slander the image of the mother to make it look like whatever happened wasn't cotton at all. And that, she, whatever bullshit they would have gone to, like, well, she was having voluntary relationships. She was involved with lots of men. Like, how do you know it was him? Like, they would have been trying to paint her as a loose woman and all kinds of stuff.
A loose woman. What a classic phrase.
Yeah, it
right?
really is.
If someone called me a loose woman, that would really make my day. Yeah. I'd really laugh really hard.
Yeah.
Right? But they use that term in the movie.
No, you're not wrong.
I think that it's important to remember that, like, when you see somebody who's got all of this, like, sexuality is already going to be a complicated thing, especially in a small town where everybody there's so many people that have kids before they leave high school, but sex is still wrong before marriage.
Well, here's what I'll say is I think sexuality for any teenage girl is very complicated, period.
Yes.
And she says the thing in the grocery store where she says, every time he tries to touch me, I flinch. So that's the part of me that wonders, is she really feeling sexual? Like, and if it's in there, I'm sure it is because she's a person, but, like, is it still really connected to really negative feelings? Where is she really getting, like, aroused? Not to talk about a teenage girl like this, but, like, because honestly too, like, her body language with Billy, like in that first scene, she doesn't seem very comfortable. And I wonder if that's because she's just not, so much of, I can only speak for women because I'm a woman. So much of a female's sexuality and our arousal and our excitement is connected to our emotional state. And I wonder for her if that's really where, since she's been able to, maybe we can make the argument that it's almost like all the feelings she has about her mom's death has kind of been fauceted. Like, what is the word I'm looking for?
Infused?
Not infused.
Entangled?
Like, funneled. That's the word. I was thinking of a funnel in my brain. Funneled into, like, her sexual part of it and, like, being like put off by it. And then I would argue too, the scene in the beginning when she shows him her boobs, I think that really reminded me of, like, what it was like for, I remember what I was saying to Hannah was, I'm so fucking happy I'm not a teenager anymore. Because for a girl, there's so much negotiating, and not for yourself. You're negotiating to make the guy in front of you happy. Yep. And so girls don't do that because they're trying to feel sexy. Girls do that because they're trying to be sexy. And so that didn't feel like a happy moment to me where she's embracing some version of sexuality. That felt like her giving something of herself up to make him happy. Like, I don't think she got any thrill out of showing her boobs to him.
Yeah, I don't
But
think
that's
so
also
either.
If I'm projecting my experience of sexuality at that age onto it. And Hannah, I seems like she's agreeing with me. It's like you're constantly deciding what pieces of yourself, this is so bleak, what pieces of yourself you're going to give away to the boy that's in front of you.
I don't think that you're wrong here. I think that is an extremely complicated moment for her. And what I meant by negotiating with it is she's trying to engage with it in a way that she feels like is okay for her to do. Yeah. With her. I mean, he's trying to push her beyond where she's comfortable. And that's like where it gets complicated because her demeanor changes completely when she's like willing to flash him. But when he's like pushing on her, that's when we see the recoil. Like her behavior changes quite a bit when she feels more in control of it. And not that justifies that women are put in a position where they feel like they have to make men happy by giving them something, because that's totally true and that's fucked up. And I'm not going to contest that at all, But what I want just is to illustrate the point for her is that how that trauma might be impacting how she processes that and what she might be okay with negotiating with herself with, not to justify the behavior of men or in the movie or Billy being a predator, just how this might impact the way she's going to think about it.
And I think that scene in particular just is something that feels very reminiscent of any interaction with a boy when you're a teenage girl. I think that's what it is about that scene. I think the things that both of you are saying make a lot of sense. But I think for me, I could probably pull maybe 15 stories that are similar to that in terms of my experience as being a young girl and having and feeling like I have to do something in order to keep him interested in me. And I think that is what I feel like I get from Sydney somewhat in that scene.
Sure. I think you're supposed to get that.
I mean, like, throughout the movie, she verbalizes that as a message. Like in that whole conversation where she's with Tatum in the grocery store, she's like, I can tell that I'm bumming him out. And I can tell that I'm being like kind of like a drag, like to put it succinctly, like, and that he wants, and that I can't like be what he needs me to be sexually, and that I'm being the dick in this relationship for depriving him, which is a very like, which is a true thought you have when you're. It just made me feel sad for my young self and for like all young girls, because even like the happy giddy way she responds after she flashes him, like. That is also a real reaction. Like, in the moment, you feel like, I'm in it. I'm fun. I'm, like, having fun. And then when you're older and you know better, you look back and you're like, oof, girl. like, you thought you were in it and you thought you were having fun. And some girls are. Like, I don't want to do a whole gigantic brush stroke over the whole thing. But I think a lot of times you're just caught up in the moment. And then later you're like, did I want to do that?
Yeah.
Or did I do that because I felt like I had to give him something? Which he sets that up, that dynamic.
Yeah.
Well, of course he does. Yeah. And not every guy puts women in that situation. Not every sexual situation between teenagers like that. Sometimes it's both of them are exploring the same, negotiating those same boundaries with each other. And it's a like authentic experience where they're exploring like, what do I feel okay with doing at this point in time with my moral code and my comfortability level here and my confidence level, etc., as I explore my sexuality. But that's not what's happening with Billy because he's a fucking creep.
Yeah, and so I think what also seems, I guess, obvious to me now watching this as a therapist is it seems like part of why she seems so resilient is I would be shocked if she hasn't been having some form of therapy or done something therapeutic post everything. Because, well, she uses terms like post-traumatic stress in the movie. Yep. And also her kind of knowing to like distance yourself from things that upset you, like take breaks, call Tatum, and have a support system. It all seems like at her age, like is so like thoughtful and mature that I'm assuming that hopefully she's had a therapist who's kind of helped her with this.
Yeah, I think there's two things that we know pretty clearly about Sydney, and that maybe even three. One is that she has had therapy.
Yeah.
The way she talks about it, she's too educated for a teenager to not have had therapy. She's had therapy.
Yeah, there's just no doubt about it.
There's no doubt about it. And the way that she's reacting to things with coping skills, like she has had the opportunity to process through what that's been like with somebody. When you have not had that and you've been exposed to as public a case as she has, the likelihood that she would be as resilient as she is without some sort of help from somebody is low.
Because in the times that we see her kind of more in like fight response,
right,
is well earned. Like when she punches Gail in the face. And when she's like more fighty with like the bad guy.
Well, I think, and I think the other thing, the second thing that we've learned about her is that she has had self-defense classes.
The way she flips Stu at the end, you have to have learned how to do that.
Yeah,
she's had self-defense classes. Like her attacks and the way she's processing, like she has had a plan on how to get out of that house and what to do. Look at, like, we see it with her dad where she kind of like has a way to lock her door with the other door.
That's also a very teenage girl, though.
I mean, it is, but she also rehearsed that in her mind.
And how she knows how to call 911 on her computer.
Right. Although those things are things that people who have had someone violate your safe place, which is your home.
Yeah.
Anybody that has violated your safe place, that is no longer safe, and you now create an escape plan, which most of us don't consider that at our house because that's our castle. And since she's had that, she has had probably somebody walk her through that as well as walked through it in her own head because she's obviously intelligent. So but she has developed self-defense skills. The way she fights is not random, and it is not swiping and clawing and survival mode fighting. She is strategically using like self-defense style combat to get out of situations in very effective ways.
That's a good point. Like when she takes the umbrella and she pushes it through his bullet hole.
Yeah.
Billy's at the end. Like she knows how to like hit them where they're weak, which is what you learn in self-defense. I imagine. I've never been, but that's what I assume.
You learn how to. It's essentially based on like Krav Maga, which is the Israeli
like all defense, right?
It's the Israeli street fighting combat. It's the military, the Israeli military, which is what largely self-defense style fighting is, because it teaches you to cause the most massive damage in the most vicious way immediately. It tells you to incapacitate. It's not a sport, unlike
MMA.
Unlike MMA or unlike karate or the other thing is not. It's not a sport. It is how do I incapacitate this person? It uses the most brutal, vicious moves, lots of groin strikes, eye gouges, like hitting them there where they're hurt, incapacitating knees, joints. Like it uses vicious strikes not designed for someone to like play fight with you with. It is how do I end this threat immediately? And she fights that way.
And I also feel like part of what I would imagine you learn in self-defense also, because I have not taken it, but I will be. You better watch the fuck out too. But is that she also knows how to do it without hurting herself. Like I feel like she uses the right parts of her body in terms of like when she punches Gale. Like I feel like a lot of times when we see like somebody who doesn't know how to fight, like they're always like, oh, like my hand hurts because like they did it weird or whatever. And she seems very, I guess, just more aware of her body and more connected to her body in terms of, which would make sense if she had self-defense classes.
Correct. She uses knee strikes, elbow strikes, and when she's punching, if you punch with your smaller two fingers, you will get boxer's break because the outer two knuckles, or the inner two knuckles, I guess, the ones on your forefinger and your middle finger, those are your striking joints. The other two you will break, and you cause the knuckles to recede in the hand, and that's often where you get boxer's break. That's what it's called.
Thanks.
And she does not get that. The way she strikes Gale, she knows exactly what she's doing. The way she strikes the ghost face every time she encounters and uses her body to create throws and use her legs. These are not things that come innately to us. She's taught this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a way that, you know, if something traumatic has gone, that's a way that you empower yourself and probably get to a place of post-traumatic growth after something really bad has happened to you, the way that has happened with Sydney, is then you do things that make you feel strong, that make you feel empowered, like taking a self-defense class, like knowing how to contact 911 on your computer, which was probably cutting edge technology when this
in
movie
1996.
came out.
We're talking like AOL like 2.0. Yeah.
Where you put it on, you get the disc. When you get the disc in the mail?
When you get the disc in the mail.
In the mail.
The mail. Or you pick it up at the grocery store somewhere. Yeah, this is early AOL, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, too. They put them
no, I know what you're talking
like
about.
right in between the door and the register.
Where you have to get off the internet so your parents can use the phone.
Or you get mad like, God, someone's calling again.
Yeah.
I was in a chat room I wasn't supposed to be in.
And I think that's also like something I would recommend to like clients. Like if I had a client who went through something like this and were feeling really scared, I would say like, do you want to take a self-defense class? Because what it's also doing is it's taking the fight or flight response that you have naturally when you've been frightened or traumatized, and it puts it in a proper place. It puts it in more of a activated, like appropriate, empowered place versus like, because when she does the fighting in the movie, it's not from a panicky place of I'm gonna freak out and come at you. It is very, like you're saying, very like calculated or very strong, for lack of a better word, very powerful, I guess. She's collected, controlled.
She's reacting with deliberate action.
Deliberate.
Yeah, that's the word.
It's deliberate action. She knows what she is doing. But she's also reacting. She's doing it fast too.
Yeah.
Like she's not thinking about it. She knows. She's rehearsed this. She has done this with bag work. She has done this with a trainer. She has gone through this before. Mm-hmm. The way she fights is not. It's not accidental. And
it's really cool to see a female final girl who is this self-possessed. because even like in Halloween, like with which they referenced the movie, like the Jamie Lee Curtis character, like she fights and she lives, but she's like sobbing in a closet, sobbing in the kitchen, sobbing while stabbing him with a knife. Like she's always like falling apart,
right?
And like and like fighting in a very like flailing, like I stabbed you incidentally way.
Yeah, she's not stabbing his ass accidentally with that umbrella.
Yeah, and like the fact that she like takes the gun and she takes the like voice modulator and she takes the costume. Like her brain is, she must be smart as fuck. Like her brain is like operating on like the next level during this.
Yeah. She ends up getting a step ahead of them because she's used to being in survival mode and they're used to being in adrenaline.
Which is, I guess I don't know a ton about
adrenaline, but
yeah, because I don't know a ton about post-traumatic growth, but I feel like, is that a presentation of it where like when she goes in that survival mode, she almost gets to like a higher level of thinking?
Yes.
Whereas when you're in post-traumatic stress disorder response, you go to your primal brain that is like just flailing.
What she has learned how to do and trained how to do is trained how to respond like a combat veteran would. Like, she is not rattled by what's going on. Like, we see her rattled when she realizes someone's in the house initially, but then once she starts locking into her plan, like, she starts operating like she knows what exactly she is doing. She knows the route out of the house. She knows how to deal with this, how to deal with that, where to jam his ass up, and then her fighting style. And especially the more confident she gets, the more used to being in distress she gets. She has rehearsed that. She has practiced that. She has sparred with people. You don't get that otherwise. You're like, I'm not a martial artist, but I did wrestle, and I was a security guard, and I have worked in residential where I've had to put people in restraints. And I'll tell you, like, the first day you go through that versus, before you leave that, the next time you do it, you get this quiet calm. You watch the person elevating, and where these guys are, the ghost face guys, you see them, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. They are just going after stuff. I've never seen a killer get their ass whooped like
so many times.
So many times. It's so bad.
Well, because they go into their primal brain. They just go into full like anger.
They go into tunnel
anger
vision.
And panic.
Tunnel vision. It's tunnel vision. Their blood pressure goes up so much that they get locked into their target, and that's why they stop seeing things. Because once they lose control of the scenario, they lose that ability that she has found, which is she is controlling her blood pressure, controlling her engagement by keeping herself out of tunnel vision and focused on what she is doing. Like, you can tell when somebody goes into that. It's what's called sensory exclusion. You reach a point where you stop hearing, you stop losing your peripheral vision because your blood pressure goes so high that you are physiologically incapable of doing anything other than responding what's in front of you.
And I guess, that's a good point too. I think, when you're prepared for that, because I've also worked in like heightened, more intense psychiatric settings where I have been like attacked regularly by smaller people, children. So it wasn't where I was like ever really worried about my well-being.
Yeah.
But even when it's a tiny person attacking you, like it does make your blood pressure go just because that part of your brain that's like, you're being attacked. And so the more you do it, the more it is that thing you're talking about where I would like almost like every other thing would power down.
Yep.
And my brain would power up.
Yep.
And I'd be like, here we go. Because it is like, your brain just focuses on what you need to focus on, and it is a weird eerie calm that comes over you when it's something that's you've practiced over and over again. So I hear you on that, and that makes a lot of sense for Sydney.
It's right. It's a theory of relativity in play. It's the E equals MC squared. Like, your time slows down. Your experience of time slows down because your thinking speeds up so much that you're able to like slow down and start perceiving things different. And even though these situations are happening really fast, like you think about the times if you've had to restrain somebody, like you see somebody that's mentally ill and going through a crisis, and you have to both keep somebody who's willing to be in danger and make you put you in danger because they're so upset at that particular moment.
Dysregulated.
There's danger plus opportunity is the therapeutic crisis intervention definition of what a crisis is: danger plus opportunity. And you realize that like things start slowing down for you because you're not the one who's in crisis. You're not the one who's like elevated, and you're able to stay calm and plan your moves while watching them just react. And it totally changes the game because think about any interactions people get with where you're able to control and use moves and use controlling holds and things like that don't cause any injury or pain to this person, but can lock out their joints and hold them still so that they and you don't get hurt, and it resolves the situation safely. That can't be done if you're fighting the person.
Yeah.
And for her to be on top of the way she's doing, she has rehearsed this, and you have to practice that. And if you've ever wrestled or boxed anybody, too, it starts to slow down, and you start to realize, okay, he's going to try to shoot here, he's going to do this move, I'm going to do that move, we're going to do this. If you are in sensory exclusion, you're not thinking about anything but smash. Mm-hmm. Which not in the 2020 version of the term. You are thinking.
I'm thinking about a smashing, baby.
I mean, power to you, I guess. But you are thinking
and
like more.
Popped into my head.
Giggity. You're thinking more of the Hulk version of Smash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I think I do remember there was the very specific the way that she kick Stu's ass in this movie was when it really crystallized for me. She's taking self-defense. Just like, I know I already said it, but the way that when he comes at her and she like somersaults both their bodies around, I was like, oh, you just don't know how to do that. Like, you're trained how to flip a man's weight against himself, especially as a woman.
Yeah, it's judo is what that is.
Yeah, and then when she flips him over like they fight over the couch. But yeah, so she definitely has taken a lot of steps to empower herself. Which the movie doesn't recognize. We just we're inferring
subtext. Yep.
But definitely seems like it's there. And I would say like the last thread seems to be like the sexual piece, which I would assume I would imagine, or I guess I'm hoping that if she's still in therapy, I'm sure she's talking about that.
Right. Well, look and look at the evidence for all this is like, look at the way Sydney responds. Or what's Rose McGowan's character's name?
Tatum.
It's a horrible name.
I like it.
I hate it. I hate everything about it.
Okay, Slytherin. I feel like, but like, look at just the evidence of that. She has not been in that situation.
She still throws that beer bottle at his dick, which I was like, yes, girl.
I mean, she responds, the way she responds is so primal.
Yes. She's just fighting.
She is fighting, but then she also sees the first opportunity to escape and tries to put herself through a doggy door, which is a fucking terrible decision.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is like a rat trying to escape a fire kind of thing. Like, you just like go, and you don't really think about like if my body could fit through it.
Nope, because all you're thinking is
escape,
and that's it. You're in lizard brain, like you said. And the difference in the way she responds versus the way Sid responds, like, shows you someone who is rehearsed at being in danger and comfortable with it and understands what her plan and her moves are, and someone who is going, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck.
And I would say another sign of that too is like how long it takes Tatum to realize that she's in real danger. In that garage scene.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like Sydney, because of her post-traumatic stress, would have been like, oh, I'm in danger, like, or I'm possibly in danger a lot sooner.
Yeah.
And would have started like thoughtfully protecting herself a lot sooner. Like, I don't think she would have flipped out, but I think she would have like maybe been a little artful about it.
I think there's a 0% chance Sydney would have held onto that beer that long, and I think,
or like joked that much. I think like, let me through.
Right. I think
how close she got to his body.
Right.
Like,
no,
she would have been on the other side of the room.
Right. And she would have had weapons.
And she would have found a weapon.
She would have found a garden tool. There's a rake in the background. Like, she would have had something in her hands.
And just beat him. And just beat the shit out of him.
She might have
stabbed his ass with that bottle.
She might have threw that beer bottle at him like right away from across the garage.
Yeah.
Like at the head.
Well, she had like 6 of them, so that's a pretty substantial weapon. Those are heavy.
And how I know that is like when she was in the bathroom too, and that person was in the bathroom.
Right.
Do we even know like if that was a kid playing games in the high school, or if that was a real killer? Probably.
I think the assumption is that that's the real killer.
But like,
he then killed the principal. So
that's true. Yeah. But because even in that situation, like, she doesn't give him the opportunity to get one on her. Like, as soon as she suspects he's in the bathroom with her, she's slipping and sliding, and she's out that bathroom. Like, she's not fucking around.
Which is a thing that you get into when your safety has been violated. Mm-hmm. When you are a trauma survivor, this is what hypervigilance does to you and for you. Like, people process that sometimes as a sign of a disorder without recognizing that what it really is an adaptive survival strategy.
Yeah. And in case people don't know hypervigilance, I don't think we've defined it in a while. It is when you are like red alert all the time, and you're like hyper aware of like your surroundings, and you're like kind of always assessing more than normal, like assessing like if attack is going to happen around you.
You're planning your escape, you're planning your attacks constantly aware of every sound, every movement, every person. You're watching their movement. If you ever been to a restaurant with a police officer, or
yes.
where does your dad sit?
You always sit, you never put your back to the door. You always sit where you can see the door at all times.
And why is that?
Because you want to know who's coming and going, and you never want someone to sneak up on you.
You guys just know, right? When you guys go out to family dinner, you just know.
My dad's a cop if no one knew. Yeah.
So you know.
Yeah.
Where does Dad always probably sits? In the furthest back corner.
He always sits with his back to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Every time.
That's Wyatt Earp made that mistake once.
Okay.
I'm serious.
And I
he made that mistake once, and that was it for him.
And I do think the bathroom scene is also a really good indicator, like, of her growth, and like the fact that she has taken a lot of steps to be empowered, or to flip it, because like she'd overheard those two girls talking about her, so she was in a heightened state of distress, like she was crying in the stall. So she should have, in other situations, where I think in another kind of movie, after like being in that state and then being attacked, she would have been like panicked, screaming, you know what I mean, like flailing and not easily killed, I guess. Whereas in this one, she like does this, what we've been talking about. She calms down, she kind of gets out of that emotional state, and she slides out of that bathroom like a gangster. Like that's also a sign, I think, that she's gotten some sort of training, like the way she expertly slides out of that bathroom, like between his legs or something, or like right beside him. Like it's pretty awesome
and fast. And something that I want to make sure that I highlight on, because sometimes people end up hearing things like this and then feeling bad about themselves, is that no matter how much training you have, you are not immune to sensory exclusion. You are not immune to reaching a point where your blood pressure gets so high that you cannot do anything but be in tunnel vision. It does not matter the level of experience you have. The level of training and experience makes it more likely you're able to deal with that or get in and out of it, but it does not prevent you, and there should be no feelings of shame if you get into a situation where you fight, flight, or freeze in a way that doesn't make sense to you, in a way that doesn't gel with whatever training you've had. None of us are immune to that happening ever.
I think that's a good point too, because also like Sydney's kind of exceptional. Like she's probably also very highly naturally resilient, if I had to make a guess.
Yeah.
I think she has a lot of what we call like protective factors. Like she seems like her high intelligence, probably naturally resilient, you know, and all this. She also is someone who is like has a lot of means. She has a big ass house, like, you know, so all of her basic needs are cared for.
Right, in California.
She's white.
In California.
She's white. She's pretty. Like, she's got a lot of stuff going for her that would make this a more of a
her dad
realistic
loves her.
outcome. Yeah, and also
she has a good relationship with her dad. Yeah, absolutely.
Her getting to this place within a year is wild.
Yeah,
and that's probably the part of this movie that's the most unrealistic.
Yeah,
because like, especially given how young she is, like, but also that can be an advantage too. When you're young, you can be a lot more adaptable, like surprisingly more adaptable. And also when you're young, your priorities are still kind of interesting. Like when I work a lot with teenagers, and they'll have like the worst things, in my opinion, happening to them, and they're still just worried about like their social media and if this boy at school likes them.
Yeah.
So also like that can be a saving grace being a teenager, because your priorities still stay pretty like quote unquote normal, even though like for an adult it might not. And I think, like, piggyback on what you're saying, Ben, like, this isn't also the goal. Like, the goal isn't to get to post-traumatic growth. Like, that is good if you can get there. And, I mean, like, in this terms of, I don't want anyone to feel bad if they can't get there. They have to, like, pressure themselves to get to a space of post-traumatic growth. Like, sometimes you just, like, have to be where you are with what's happened to you. And if just getting to a place where your functioning's good, that's good. You're looking at me funny, Ben.
Well, being a trauma therapist, I
you can disagree with me.
I would have to fundamentally disagree with you, but I think that the message you're giving is a good one. Like, what you should, it's just it's the way you phrased it.
You can switch it up.
I'm going to switch it up on you. Is that post-traumatic growth should always be the goal, but you shouldn't be rushing it
right. Which is,
I think that's the message we're giving.
Yeah.
It's just, Like, that's
You
my
shouldn't be
specialty. So
pressuring
like I can't like my brain doesn't let that stand. Like no.
I guess what I mean is you shouldn't be focused like if I have to be getting to post-traumatic growth.
Right.
And then like stressing yourself out and judging yourself.
Absolutely.
Like that shouldn't be like what you're like hyper focusing on.
No.
When you're doing treatment.
No, you have to be focused on dealing with getting your body relaxed and being able to be in a space where you can process through what's happened to you before you'll ever be in the place where you are finding meaning and worrying about what you're going to do after. But it does help to target that and know that you can reach that point where you can make meaning of what's happened for you, because the name of the individual I was talking about is Viktor Frankl. That's the name. He was the one who founded this the therapy called logotherapy, all based on the idea that we must assign meaning in order to find purpose. And part of that, the way that applies to trauma, and especially the way he applied it, is he was in Auschwitz. He lost his wife to the Holocaust, and he had to go through and like observe how people gave up and who didn't while in the process of going through a death camp, and how people then afterwards went through knowing that people that they had in their lives were either forever different or forever gone, and how they had to make meaning and go on. And for him to have learned that, that's where that comes from. So when you're dealing with trauma therapy and trauma clients, educating them that keeping your eye on what you might want to do with what's happened to you so that you can take control of it again is huge. But like Brittany's saying, is putting yourself in a position where you're guilting yourself or feeling ashamed that you're not there now is just absolutely not fair to you, because it takes a lot of work and a long time, and people get there in their own time. So that message that Brittany's giving is so important to hear, but just make sure that it's don't not target that.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind, that that's where you want to get to, but don't be ashamed that you're not there now.
Because, like, we're giving Sydney a lot of praise. Where she's at is really dope. And it's, in my opinion, pretty unrealistic for a year.
Totally unrealistic.
Completely.
Yeah.
Especially at the anniversary, she would be
at the anniversary,
unlikely to be in this place.
You should be a wreck.
Yeah. And also just the idea that, like, the re-traumatization of the trial.
Yes.
I feel like it would be so hard for her to be able to... I don't know, just thinking about teenagers in general and how when I work with teenagers now, when they've experienced trauma and it's like they still can't quite connect to it. And so I feel like this would be something that would take some time, both building trust with the therapist if she'd never been in therapy before, and also just trying to really be outside of the survival mode. I feel like it would take a while for her to be completely out of that and to be able to recognize it for herself. So I really do feel like a year just is complete madness. I just don't think it would happen that way.
It wouldn't. And also the thing we talked about are protective factors, but let's talk about her risk factors. Is that there was instability in her parents' marriage, and we don't know how and when she found out that mom had been having, and dudes were at their house. So,
and it sounds like everyone knew about it. It was like a town rumor.
Well, they knew about it after.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if they knew about it when they knew about it. Like, it became certain by this point it's a town rumor, but we don't think we get the genesis of that. But the thing we know is that we don't know, that it must be considered in how unrealistic her presentation is that what's likely to happen is that she didn't know this stuff that was happening while she was at school and dad was at work.
True.
Or when dad was out of town and like she sent Sydney to go, sleep over at her friend's house, that this stuff was happening, that she had no idea this was going on, and found out all of this stuff about her mom after her mom was murdered, and then found out through the news and through rumors and stuff that came out as the investigation went on and information leaked, and Gail got her claws into things and started writing articles about tidbits or things she paid people for. The likelihood that she is dealing with all sorts of challenging emotions about who her mom was versus who she knew her as is likely to cause a whole lot of problems and anger and behavioral changes and emotional changes that she's not displaying at all that seemed totally unrealistic to me.
Well, yeah, and I think a good point too, like that both of you have brought up, but Hannah just did, is like this is like an ongoing situation too. It's not like it's been like a full year of peacefulness, since her mom was murdered.
Nope.
Like those trials, like those kind of trials go on forever. Like then the book coming out and the news and sensationalism, like maybe it's been a month since she's been actively doing something about her mom's death.
Yeah.
So that also is what makes it so unrealistic, is like this wasn't like one thing happened and then she's had a year to like work through it. It's like chronically been going on.
Yeah.
And probably like you're saying too, Ben, like new things unfolding all the time. Then she has to deal with that. And now I have to deal with this new information. Now I got to deal with this new information. And all that in itself is a trauma.
Absolutely. And a recurrent trauma.
Yeah.
Like that's not just like a single incident trauma. That is what we call a chronic trauma, and it's going to be recurrent. It's going to keep coming up. And it's going to keep coming up in ways over and over again. And remember, this is the days of hard copy. This shit is and Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted and all that's like they are airing this story all over in all sorts of ways, trying to narrativize it. This shit's running in the National Enquirer. Like this is. She is exposed to this constantly. There is 0% chance, in my educated opinion, that in reality she would have been as put together as she is.
Yeah, and they're. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Hannah.
And I also feel like just something that I know when we talk about grief in general, the piece of the identity of how our identity changes in terms of when we lose someone, and so I also feel like when your identity is connected to. She knows her mom. She probably likes things about her mother, I would imagine. And that there are certain pieces of that are in her own identity. So I think, again, that piece of, do I really want to still be like my mom? And how that probably intersects with the sexuality piece that we've talked about. So also just knowing that when you lose someone that helps you know who you are, shaking up that bit again would be very difficult to be able to stabilize in maybe like 2 months after everything with the trial has been done.
Oh, and especially adding on to that, it's not just losing that person, it's losing that person and the idea of who that person was.
Yes.
And that's the one that's going to cause more damage than physically losing her, is finding out that mom isn't who you thought she was.
And that's going to be the thing that she's going to be working on in therapy for a long time. How do you because I think it's really hard in the experience I've had with clients. It's like, how are you angry with someone who you can't confront now?
Yeah.
Because they're gone. And like, that's such a complicated, because as we've talked about in other episodes of this podcast, the illusion of closure, like feeling like I need closure and now I can't have it because this person's gone. But you can still get
bride.
But you can
Princess
still get
bride.
Yes, but you can still get closure or whatever that means for yourself. So we've talked a good deal, way more than I thought we would, about Sydney.
Yeah, actually more than I thought we would too. I mean, like, obviously her story is super complicated. We don't get a lot of ideas, but
I'm glad we talked about her, because I would assume most people who tune into this think we're going to just go off about Lily and Stu, and we're about to. But I think it's good that, like, focusing on like a positive character.
I feel like this is the point where you can say not to get too into it, and then to do your thing where you get like entirely into it.
And now we're going to talk for 2 hours about Lily and Stu.
The thing I just said, we're not going to get too into because it's going to derail the point that we were on. I feel like you can say that now. It's your new catchphrase. Go.
Well, we can get into it.
Okay.
So
No, Brittany, I'm trying to set you up with a catchphrase.
Okay. Billy and Stu are two little peas in a pod. The murderers of this movie. So, which I think they do. I think this movie talks about, which is the meta of this movie, is they sort of talk about the psychology while they're having it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like it's tongue in cheek while like making fun of itself for doing all the things that that happen. Like even Sydney, like legit runs up the stairs after talking about like well, she should be running up the like
some
running out the
stupid
front
idiot's always running up the stairs.
She'd be running out the front door, and what's the first thing she does? She goes
she tries
out
to run out the front door.
Like
it's because she lacks it. It's because she puts the chain across and she can't get the chain undone in enough time before he's attacking her again.
Yeah, but here's the thing: where she's a teenager, is her dumbass went out on the porch And the first call on is like, what am I doing right now? Where do you see me? Like, and that's a very juvenile thing. I feel like,
no doubt,
like that was pretty on brand for what a teenager might do. Of like, are you gonna hurt me? I'm right here. And then like, you're like, yes, yes, they will hurt you, and you are taunting them. This is dumb.
Yeah,
but teenagers are dumb. So. Teenagers.
So speaking about dumb teenagers, so Billy and Stu, the one concept we wanted to touch upon is this concept called folie à deux, which is a French phrase that stands for madness of two or madness in two. And it's the idea that symptoms of a delusional belief or sometimes hallucinations are transmitted from one individual to another. So it's basically like when two people get together who would be quote unquote sane apart, when they get together, it's just this mystical combination of personalities that make them go crazy. Like that's like the layperson inappropriate way to think about it. And I think that's the way it's portrayed. If people are familiar with the term, I've only really heard of it in the pop culture sense of like, ooh, like a flashy case. Like the way, I think one of the most famous ideas of it is this famous case from like the 50s or 60s where Peter Jackson did a movie called Heavenly Creatures with Kate Winslet, where these two real girls, 15-year-old girls who were like supposedly were fine, like perfectly sane two girls, like because they were so enmeshed with each other and thought they were going to be separated, ended up bludgeoning to death like one of their moms. And when they were found guilty in court, I think the really only consequence they got was that they have to be physically separated from each other. And then supposedly, and I'm not super versed on this, you can email us if I'm totally wrong, supposedly they went on to live like perfectly regular lives for the rest of their lives separate from each other. It was like this so the way it's thought of pop culturally is it's like two people get together and just because they're together they go kind of insane because of this weird mystical influence they have on each other. So you could argue that with this movie, is it a case where two people, like just the two perfect people, found each other to kind of fit into this puzzle where they behave this way? And I guess one thing we want to just myth bust right out the gate is that this used to be in the diagnostic manual when
we were in school. Even it's up to the DSM-4 TR, and
it's gone from other words. Like it's called like shared psychosis. It's also been called shared delusional disorder,
shared psychotic disorder.
There's still in the DSM now like a
unspecified,
almost like adjacent diagnosis of like if one person's highly delusional, they can impact someone around them. It's like just like another,
like imagine if your parent, like we see it, in things like A Beautiful Mind, which yes, we know you've asked for it. We know it'll happen, I promise, someday. But the thing that you see, like imagine having a parent telling you your whole life that there's a guy in a black hat following you around, or there's another, my college roommate is visiting and he's here, or things like you see happen to Howard Hughes in The Aviator, where his mother convinced him that everything was contaminated. If someone is influencing you with that and continue inundating you with that message and you start to believe it, that can happen. And there's another colloquial term for that gets used on this podcast a lot: gaslighting.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know if that's why it's no longer in the DSM, is because of that's such a nuanced idea. Like when you are heavily influenced by another person who's probably truly ill, like it's the nature versus nurture thing of like, once you're away from that person, you can like stop having these symptoms because you are being heavily influenced by someone who's in a position usually of power.
Or that it's a power of some way, and it doesn't have to be like it's your mother or your father. It could be this is the cool kid you want to be like, or this is a person you want to date, or this is the captain of the team, like any of those things. And I think one of the reasons it disappeared is, honestly, I think it's to not give defense attorneys ammunition.
Oh,
that is my guess. Is it was a political decision because the DSM. It is a wonderful manual, but if you look at who's written it and who's in it, and the lack of therapists that are involved in the classification of these diseases, is
and the lack of people of color who are writing the book.
That too is the. But if you look at that, there's definitely some things that are political, and I have a feeling that is an idea that DAs and the prosecutors societies probably got together and be like, all right, so we're reviewing this book, right? So this one, we're going to take this out because people are getting off on some bullshit with this, and we need to take that out so that doctors can't diagnose people with this for the defense.
Yeah,
because that that could set somebody up for a not guilty by reason of insanity, which is a discussion we're not going to have today.
No,
but,
we are not.
No,
but
We're
that having that in there could be something that would set up at least ammunition for that, to the point where it could be at least petitioned for, because it's a formal diagnosis. And if you remove that from the classification of disease, you take away the ability for that to be used as a excuse for behaviors.
Because it's also like when you really think about, like a really messy idea, like
Very
in this,
messy.
because in this situation, like it is like the nature versus nurture thing too. Like, because I think we're gonna get into it soon, but like Billy is very obviously presents with either conduct disorder and or antisocial personality disorder. Because conduct is like what you get diagnosed with pre-18, and antisocial personality disorder is what you get diagnosed with post-18, and we're not sure how old Billy is, or any of them are actually in this movie. So Stu seems like the one who would be more like diagnosed with folie à deux, like of the two. And so it is one of that argument that you could make if you were working with Stu of like, would he have only done this if he had met Billy? Or was he always capable of this and might have always done it, and Billy just like turned it on for him or normalized it or gave him like because kind of when we think about mob mentality, when there's more than just you doing it, when there's shared responsibility for decisions being made or not made, then you are more likely to do it because you don't feel like it's just on you. You can blame like the other people involved. And so it is that interesting thing of like, does Stu also have antisocial personality or conduct disorder traits? And they were just pumped up by Billy and then presented? Or would Stu have always just been like a fine, like functioning person if he hadn't met Billy? Like, I think that would be the interesting thing to break apart if I was to like examine this case or like work on this case after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think I feel like there are very clear indications that Billy has, that no matter what happens, Billy has something going on that's separate from Stu, and that Stu might have a different kind of motivation or connection or something that or maybe, to be perfectly honest, if we're talking about somebody that Billy has traits of antisocial personality disorder, that he is manipulating Stu in a different way as well, giving him something that he wants. So no, it is really fascinating when you really think about their relationship.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing that's most important to me is like their relationship is fascinating, but we know nothing.
No, we don't.
About Stu. Other than he's like a goofy hearted kind of like broy bro on the outside.
I think what makes Stu feel different than Billy is how they both react when they realize that they're fucked.
I honestly feel like it's the amount of product in their hair that really differentiates them.
Listen, we all have that much product in our hair. When I met you, sir, Ben,
I did not have that much product in my hair.
You were tickling the edge.
I was most certainly not. That is false. I'm going to go on record and declare that is false.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that I've seen the pictures, and Brittany is correct.
I did not have that much hair. It is not possible. I had that much product in it.
Well, I hear what you're saying. The 90s, it was like all of her hair was like goopy and greasy. Like, what were we trying to do? But I think like Stu, when he realizes that he's fucked, and also he's bleeding out, so that colors the situation, he starts to get upset. Like, he starts crying. He's thinking about like the consequences, like my parents are going to be upset with me. Like, he's thinking about like all those things in that moment. Which makes me feel like he has more going on in terms of like he feels connected to systems outside of Billy. He feels some sort of like A equals B, like consequences in an emotional way, and like can get upset. Whereas Billy just becomes really angry because he's not in control anymore.
Yeah, like he gets more and more frustrated. He starts to act more erratic, and And Stu just kind of is like, oh shit, like this is bad. Like the things that we've been doing are bad and this is bad. And Billy is trying to figure out how to get control back and is trying to figure out how can I still get out of this or whatever the case might be. Like it's physically evident the way that their affect is, the way that they're looking at things, like everything about them physically very much is two different stories.
I feel like, yeah, like very much like Stu is Billy's pawn. Like Billy would have always presented this way, and Stu maybe not. Like if he hadn't met Billy.
Probably not.
Yeah. And
I mean, I think he has a dark side that, you know, like he was waiting to reveal, but the likelihood that would have generated on its own to the degree it got to.
Yeah.
You know, he's smarter than he lets on.
He's crafty. They're both crafty.
They're both crafty. They're both clever. They're both actors. Like they have a lot of acting cred to them. Like acting like, you know, I just showed up after the Ghostface guy and I was gone for the whole time, but now here I am. Ta-da!
Yeah,
we gotta get out of here.
They can switch really quick.
They can switch really quick.
Really quick.
Which is
terrifying.
But that's indicative of the antisocial personality disorder. Like one of the things you see in people that develop this like serial killer like trait, because that's what these two are, serial killers, is that they get this scary thing. Is one of the things that people talk about when they work with serial killers is they get this dead eye thing. Like their affect is so flat that they don't consider killing you any different than eating Cheerios. And so in order to switch in and out of things, it suits their needs at the moment for whatever their purposes are. And they can switch in and out of that because killing you and stabbing you in the neck and watching you bleed out isn't that much different than eating a bowl of Cheerios.
Mm-hmm. And when you, in the cases of antisocial too, like you are in the more extreme cases, which we're obviously seeing in this movie, the reason why it's called antisocial isn't because you like to be in your room by yourself all the time. Like it isn't like introverted. It's like that you can't connect with like social things. And so in extreme cases, you are always like, when people talk about the show Dexter, like when he talks about his internal monologue, like I have to pretend to have feelings, or like I have to like mask a lot to act like a normal person. Like I bring donuts and I smile and I ask how your day is because that's what people do. And so I think with Billy and Stu too, like that's why you're always acting kind of. Mm-hmm. You're acting normal all the time. So it's very easy, like they're doing, to kind of turn it on and off. Because it's what like Billy's always acting like he's been dating Sydney for a full year after he murdered and sexually assaulted her mom, and acting like when he's defending her when Stu's being really tacky at the fountain, and he's like, "You're being a dick, Stu. Like don't talk like that." Like he's actively playing this role of caring, loving boyfriend while knowing in the back of his mind. Well, yeah, but knowing in the back of his mind that he killed her mom. And so, just as a refresher, because we get into it fully in the Michael Myers Halloween episode 2 years ago, here's some symptoms of antisocial, and these are ones that we also see within Billy in this movie, and Stu too, as well. It's defined by a pervasive and persistent disregard for moral, social norms and the rights and feelings of others. So basically it allows you to do criminal things to other people because you're not connected to how you're making other people feel. And you're also not connected to this is the right thing to do, or like this is what you do within society. Like you're constantly able to break social norms, which really freaks anyone out because we all operate on thousands and thousands of like unspoken social rules.
Yes.
Also, there's typically no compunction in exploiting others in harmful ways for your own gain or pleasure, and frequently manipulate and deceive other people through wit and a facade of superficial charm, or through intimidation and violence. And so we see all of that with Billy. Like, like a trait that you'll hear, like a descriptor you'll hear a lot of people with antisocial personality is, ironically, a way that you can tell is if they're very charming and they're very persuasive. And so I think when we think of it like in the scary movies, it's like someone who is like obviously gives you the creeps and they're very weird, but really more likely they're like Billy when he's in his good moods, which is very charming, really can pull one over on you.
Which, the Ted Bundy movie that came out, I can't. What is it, like Shockingly Vile, like Incredibly Evil and Shockingly Vile, or something
like that. Yeah,
with Zac Efron as Ted Bundy, like showing like how convincingly normal and nice they can be.
And in both,
it's like that's where it gets really terrifying. Is that, like I was saying, like it's not that they don't get a rush from it, because they do. It's a very exciting and arousing thing for them to do, to kill someone, but the emotional consequence of it for them is no different to them than doing anything else, because they just see you as a means to an end.
Yes.
And it's terrifying. And for my Metallica fans in there, James Hetfield plays the cop that catches him in that movie.
Oh yeah.
Cute.
And like with Ted Bundy, there's a famous, her first name's Anne, I can't remember her last name. She's a famous like true crime writer, and she's like worked with Ted Bundy at like a suicide hotline and never got vibes from him. Like never knew when he was actively a serial killer, and like never picked up on it. And she went on to write like a very famous book about him. But like that tells you a lot about how convincingly charming these kind of people can be.
Yes.
That you like, so it is that
authentic, how authentic it seems when they are literally just playing a role. Mm-hmm. That even to someone whose job is writing about crime and writing about serial killers, was literally sitting next to one for a long period of time and had no awareness whatsoever.
Yeah. So everyone who thinks that they would just know, you don't. No, no one has a magic power where they just know when people are lying.
Right. And the title of the movie we're thinking of, Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile.
That's a long title.
Yes.
It's a long title. It's a movie that feels much longer than it is. It's a great look at that, but it's not an exciting movie, because it's the scary side of watching how normal he is and how he manipulates his spouse for so long into thinking he's normal and that he's being framed and he's innocent, despite all of the evidence starting to stack up against him and him escaping and knowing how to do these things. And it's a really interesting look at it from that perspective. So if you want to see something where it's done that way, where you see that side of it, that's a good one for that. Mm-hmm. But don't expect it to be the shock factor of going through all his kills, because it's not about that. It's about the other side of him.
Mm-hmm. And and with antisocial personality, there can be a lot of arrogance, which I do think we see off of Billy. He does have an arrogant vibe about him.
Absolutely.
They think lowly or negatively of others, obviously, because like the way he talks about, I mean, like he has reasons to be so hateful towards Sydney's mom, but like to do the things he does to these people in this movie, you can't think highly of people.
Yeah.
To do that stuff to them.
You can't value people.
Yeah. And there's also a lack of remorse for your harmful actions and having a callous attitude to those you've harmed, which I guess you could make that argument with Stu, like the way he's talking about Casey and Steve at the fountain. Mm-hmm. Which is something teenagers do because their frontal lobes are fully developed and they're trying to be popular more than they're trying to be kind. Sometimes. Yeah. It's like kids will be very callous, which is why you don't diagnose personality disorders before the age of 18. Because no offense, teenagers who might be listening, a lot of teenagers display personality disorder traits just because your brain development.
Yeah.
So, and I think what is different for Billy, though, from what we can see about Billy and Stu, is they're still engaged at school. We don't hear anything about them failing out of classes or whether or not they can keep a job. Like, we don't know a lot about their inner world or their world outside of when we see them on screen.
Yeah, we don't really know anything about either one of them.
Yeah, we know that Stu has two parents, and we know that Billy's mom had an affair. I mean, Billy's dad had an affair with Sydney's mom, which kind of what led him to make all these choices in his mind. And then antisocial personality, you can often have impulsive and reckless behaviors. A big, like, one other sign or symptom of, like, that and conduct disorder, which is, like, the pre-antisocial, is being also very, like, sexually exploitive towards other people, which is what we see with Billy.
Oh, very much so.
He's so pushy with Sydney, which is, like, also not a super abnormal thing that sometimes men do or boys do. But like he's very artful in the way that he's trying to push her and manipulate her and gaslight her and sexually coerce her in the beginning. Various times in the movie, he very cruelly connects like her sexuality to her mom's death and to like his satisfaction within the relationship as well.
Which is where the evidence for the disorder would come in with him, because not only is it tied to only his needs and not any bit about her or having a genuine experience with her or sharing sexual contact or having, like a nice time with her. But no, it's, I can't kill her until she gives it up to me.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Which that is the game.
Yep.
Because they're following the horror movie rules, because that's the constructs they've set up for themselves, that they have to follow the rules of the horror movies that have been set out, and which Jamie Kennedy exists just to kind of run through us.
Mr. Exposition.
Right.
Yes.
Especially hilarious when he's going, turn around, and the guy's right behind
Oh
him.
my gosh.
Yeah.
It's just like that,
You
that's
don't know
probably
the
the most.
rules?
That's the most tongue-in-cheek part of the whole film, I think. But
Yeah.
to have the guy that knows the most not turning around. But
Yeah.
the thing that makes it the most, like, the sickness of it, that where it crosses the line from, like, somebody being a overly aggressive, overly empowered to act however they want teenage boy who think that, like, that this is a way that they get to act with women, which is, unfortunate reality of things that women have to deal with us. So sorry on behalf of men for our bullshit. The thing that I think that we need to understand is that when he is displaying that means to an end behavior, that if I get her to do this, then I can kill her, but I can't kill her until I do this, that's the degree of fucked up that this disorder takes things to.
Yes.
Where it becomes, especially with serial killers, where it has to follow a ritual, which is what makes them serial killers, is they are creating a pattern of crimes following a ritualistic pattern with ritualistically selected targets who have met certain criteria, demographic criteria, social status, etc., that they predetermined in their kills. Like, it started out as a weird revenge kill for
Stu.
for Billy.
For Billy.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I was thinking of Casey and Steve, which is revenge for Stu, because Casey dumped Stu for Steve.
Right.
Which is why they pick them.
Right. But
you're right. Billy, the first. I forget the mom is the first one.
the mom is the first, at least the first that we know of.
That is also very true.
Oof.
Because that's done so. What I've learned from listening to My Favorite Murder is that your first, when a serial killer's first kill, like, is usually a lot messier, or like they have to work up to having it really nuanced, and like how planned and nuanced, like they pulled it off. Like they got Cotton Weary tried for it and convicted.
Yep.
And like the level of planning and like thoughtfulness that takes, like Billy, I would be shocked if Billy hadn't been hurting animals or doing some sort of practice on harm before killing Sydney's mom.
They talk about being hunters.
Well, they asked, they guess they never said if they answered it or not.
They didn't, but the way that they talked about it alluded to the fact that they have been butchering animals, with talking about how they would slice and the casualness in which they did that, and the sickness. Like, that's the one clue you get that something's wrong with Stu.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah.
The way he talks that whole time.
The way he talked about that, because he changes totally. Like, he goes from being like that goofy Shaggy-like character, which is, hilarious because he ended up playing Shaggy later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that he goes from that, like, surfer brow to, like, you cut him stem to sternum and pull all the insides out, like, kind of stuff. Like, whoa!
And I bet, like, and this kind of is what more angles Stu is possibly also having, at least conduct disorder, is like they all know that Sydney's mom died a year ago, brutally. And so I think that was obviously something that they did to get a thrill.
Yep.
Like, it was thrilling to do that in front of Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At her
Absolutely.
expense.
Especially that seems to be Stu's jam. Like, Stu has that, like, Billy has that cold manipulativeness. Stu seems to get more of the gratification from taking control of things and, like, switching things up and, like, sneakily doing things. Because, like, if you really think about his character, like, he's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Billy is never wearing a mask, except for when he does the corn syrup thing. But Billy is never wearing a mask. He's always about the same. Stu goes through a big switch. So his game is convincing you that he's the happy-go-lucky dude and that he's actually capable of inflicting that much harm and enjoying it.
I think it would be definitely very interesting to know what Stu's whole childhood was like and what Billy's. Because you're like the similars when we were talking about Sydney, like obviously Billy's dad was having an affair. His mom left and seemed to have entirely abandoned him. So it does make you curious about what the dynamic was in that household before his mom left and then post his mom leaving. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he's also another kid whose dad's just like clocked out and he's like raising himself.
Yeah.
I'm probably happy to do so, really.
Yeah.
And also I think, like I think what also speaks to like the not like the callousness part and not really like thinking about other people is Billy operates, his whole motive is I was wronged and something was taken from me and therefore I'm going to punish.
Yep.
And I deserve to punish everyone who wronged me.
You took from me, I will take from you tenfold.
Yes, which is a very like operating outside of social norms, like this heightened level of justice.
I thought you were about to say operatic because it's really that too.
Yeah, it is very operatic, but like, yeah, being very like I deserve to do this. Like he feels very like righteous when he's talking to Sydney. Like your mom was a slut. And so she deserved to die. I deserve to kill her. And you deserve to die because your mom also.
While watching your dad die, and we frame your dad for your murder, which will pin your mom's murder on him. So all the pain you went through of the trial for, what was his name?
Cotton Weary.
Cotton
it's the
Weary.
dumbest name ever.
That's a pretty dumb name.
It's a pretty dumb name.
We'll just call him Leaf Schreiber.
It just sounds like made up. Like that is a
like
made
just
up
so
name.
just such a silly name.
And,
Anyway,
yeah, and Leaf Schreiber. And can we like side note talk? No, we'll talk about final thoughts. But remind me that I'm going to comment on all of the smoldering that happened in this movie that was so fucking ridiculous.
You don't love a smolder?
You know, it didn't do it for me.
No, it didn't do it for you?
It didn't, the deliberate smoldering. Like, Leaf Schreiber is 4 seconds in this film of smoldering. But we see this, they're going to pin all of this. And like he has this whole elaborate plan of the way he's going to inflict this damage and how he's going to turn it all back and then make it all before he kills her. He's monologuing, which apparently he didn't watch The Incredibles.
No, he did not.
He did not. But as he's going through this, like he's laying out to her exactly how much he thought and effort and planning has gone into completely invalidating everything she did to get justice while killing her dad in front of her.
Yeah.
And then killing her and then making it look like her dad was the one that killed her and her mom. So everything she's been through for the last year, in addition to the fact that she's about to die and her dad's about to die, has been for nothing. So he's taking everything from her. Every win, every sense of self, every sense of gain, every sense of accomplishment. He has shown true wickedness through that.
And I think that's such a clear indicator, too, of like the conduct disorder, antisocial of it all, is like, I've been wronged, so I'm not even doing like eye for an eye. Like I'm going to destroy this whole family and the bloodline, like top to bottom. Like your mom fucked with my family, so I'm not just going to take her out. I'm going to like scorched earth.
Right.
And I'm not going to be satisfied until it's scorched fucking earth.
Right. The Hamlet effect.
Yeah, like that, just that wild disconnect, the disparity of that feels, and because also where I think we see the most realistic presentation, honestly, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, is how emotional he gets when he's being outsmarted by Sydney, because in the quote unquote real world, when people when people struggle with antisocial or conduct disorder, is they actually usually get so caught up in their emotions or they're so disconnected from societal norms that they actually have a hard time functioning in the world, like keeping a job, staying in school, not getting arrested, not getting in trouble, because they're so in their like almost like alpha brain of like, I have to be dominant, I have to be in control, I have to dominate what's around me to the detriment of everything else. And so like you see that with Stu at Billy at the end, because he's starting to fuck up his whole plan because she's pissing him off so much because he's trying to regain control
and he can't.
And I think that's
she knows it.
And I think that's where more when I come across conduct, because I work with younger people, so more conduct in the real world, is it's usually people who are struggling to function. Like they're getting expelled from school, they're getting a lot of fights. And so the fact that he's able to pull off this facade, pull off these very elaborate schemes with an accomplice at his age, that's, I guess, in my opinion, the more unrealistic bit to this, that he's not constantly getting in trouble. Like, he would be the kid, like the classic bad boy who gets arrested, shit like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
He must be really smart too.
We see though that his dad wouldn't answer the phone. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that's a lie though, because his dad comes when.
Yeah, his dad's at the
call.
police station.
Yeah, because that's the lie he tells Sydney. But like we don't know a whole lot about him other than that the police seem to know him.
They seem to know him, but also, like, I guess maybe I missed it, but you never hear like that in movies like this. It's always like, oh, Billy Loomis is in the police, Billy, like where the police will just dive on a suspect because he's a bad boy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't get that energy off of him. He almost seems more like a rich kid, like his dad swoops in and saves his ass and gets him out.
Yeah.
And he's got a cellular phone, which was uncommon amongst his peers.
Well, you'd have like one for the house at that point in time, maybe.
My mom had one, and she still has the same phone number to this day.
I inherited the phone number we had from that time. I think we got one around 96, 97, and I still have that number now.
No, that's cute.
Isn't it?
So I don't know if you guys would disagree, like, about like the realism of Billy's presentation within this movie.
I think the realism of both of their presentations was actually pretty well done. Mm-hmm. And that it shows the different sides of it you might see. Like we have talked about in our Get Out episode. Michael, in the Halloween episode, we didn't because he had a pretty consistent presentation of it. But seeing the different sides of it, especially what you might see in someone who is more of a serial killer variant of this, because I know, like, last time I talked about, like, everybody who has a traumatic childhood event who fits the ACEs study doesn't become a serial killer. They're not in danger of becoming a serial killer, but everybody who's become a serial killer has had an extremely traumatic upbringing. Mm-hmm. But I think when you see this displayed in this movie, that it's pretty consistent with the development and planning and the coldness and callousness, but also the completeness and how terrifying that is, and of serial killers, and also how they end up getting caught, which is that something goes wrong and they lose control, and then they get caught because then they do something.
Yeah, it was
bananas.
It was occurring to me as you were speaking that I was talking against my own point, which is he's actively doing a crime in this movie that's going to interrupt the functioning of his whole life.
Correct.
Like he got caught serial killing.
Yeah.
And therefore, he's done.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He dies in this movie, but even if he hadn't, like, prison forever.
Right.
Like his life's over.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, like Courtney Cox existed in this movie to, like, swoop in and shoot him in the face.
Yeah. And I think, like, and my thing too, like, with Billy and Stu, is, like, I think what feels different too is, and this is me just reading into it, is I think Stu is connected to Billy, and thinks that they're like partners. And I think Billy would have killed Stu if his plan had gone to fruition.
Yes.
I think his plan was to kill Stu and then be the last person standing.
I think it was very much like the beginning of The Dark Knight planned out, like just like that, like where I kill you, you kill him, but you can stab me, I'm going to let you close enough to me, and then I'm going to kill everybody, and I'll be the last one standing because no one can be trusted but me, and no one knows the secret but me, and no one wins but me, just like Heath Ledger's Joker.
Mm-hmm. And then Billy would have gotten all the adoration of the town of, like, the final survivor, all the sympathy, and just soaked that up like a cat.
Mm-hmm. Like just big old huge sponge.
Yeah.
Full of bullshit. Yep.
Teen Creeps, which is another podcast that I am obsessed with, they every once in a while will do a movie, and they did Scream, and they posit the idea, which I think is interesting, that maybe, like, because maybe Stu is like suppressing his his sexual orientation, and maybe he's like in love with Billy, and that's part of his engine. and being in mesh with Billy, and wanting to impress him, I guess.
I mean, the wanting to be impress him and be like him and like seek his approval, I absolutely see the evidence for. I see no evidence of any homosexuality, any him being gay at all. But that we just don't know enough.
Yeah,
could that be true? Absolutely, it could be true. Maybe,
but I
don't see it.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I see in terms of that is how close they always are. But at the same time, everybody in the movie is kind of like really physically close to each other all the time. It's just very odd. It seems very odd. But like the way that he leans into Billy, like when they're talking to someone, I think is Sydney actually. Like he's just very physically close to him all the time. And I feel like that would be the only indication that he is like romantically interested in him, but that might more be just feeling really connected in terms of they're both like doing the same thing, like, and have the same goal. So it really could be either.
Right, and that is part of why Folie Deux existed, because like being that close and being that involved in things, like what you see is like when people are involved in, especially for you, Hannah, then like a cheating relationship with people, the degree of closeness that gets developed at that is absolutely false. Like for as far as what happens, it's almost like you see that they develop this own like secret world and narrative that exists only between the two of them, and it's this thing that they share that's so emotionally intense that it's all consuming, and you're thinking about it all the time and constantly planning and working with this person, and you're so close to them, and that, but then it all falls apart.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
Every single time it falls apart because it's not based in reality.
And I think it's also the thing too, at that age when you're a teenager, your relationships are kind of codependent and enmeshed at that age, and not in like the unhealthy way that we think of it as when you're adults. But I think because when you're that age, you're just everyone, like all your feelings are so big at that age, and like when you like someone, you like them so much, even when it's just friendship. And I think like in all the, which we've gone into before, like all the identity stuff that goes on as an adolescent, you know, it's probably one of those things where Stu is the perfect age and just kind of the perfect disposition to be picked by Billy, and people like Billy find people like Stu.
Yep, like we talked about many times, they just have this sick radar for it. I think like my counter to that argument that Stu's in love with Billy, you know, which, you know, we'll put a solid plausible maybe but
who knows?
I lean more towards the maybe to no side of it. What I think might be more likely is that what happened is that Stu's identity as the guy that everybody likes got threatened, and that's his image, and that's the thing he works to cultivate and provides meaning to him. And then when he got dumped for another dude who's more popular, more masculine, more this or that enraged him to a level that he could not tolerate, because he, in fact, may actually be a narcissist, and he definitely shows narcissistic traits.
Oof.
Right?
And it is that thing of like the similar of like, if you take from me, like I need to shut you down.
Right. He shows that, like when he shows his true colors, he is displaying more of a narcissism, honestly, of showing that what he can't tolerate is actually having someone invalidate him. So I just don't see the romantic thing with him. I see more of I can't tolerate having my status taken from me. My status is like the guy that everybody likes, the funny guy, all of it, like the guy that should be able to get any girl that I want, and like I couldn't get Sydney, and so she has to die. And
that's true.
What's the Drew Barrymore character? Casey dumped me for other dude Steve. So you know, like we're gonna see what his insides look like. And fuck Steve, because I'm gonna show him because she goes through a big point. We see him wearing his Letterman jacket, right? To go like, my boyfriend's big and he plays football, and I'm like, could anything be more 90s than that statement? But
I don't think so.
Nope. But like watching that, and then for him to go like this skinny goofy dude to be like, fuck you, I'm gonna kill you in a brutally way to take all your power from you, that I'm gonna kill you in front of your girlfriend, and then we're gonna see your dummy body, very obviously dummy body, bleeding out with its guts coming hanging out, and I'm going to enjoy that. And I think that is far more likely a psychological explanation for his behavior than that he is actually in love with Billy. But, you know, for that podcast was the one that you said?
Teen Creeps.
Teen Creeps. And for, if anybody from My Favorite Murder happens to be listening to this, if you let Brittany know that you've listened to us at all, she would probably literally die with excitement.
Implode.
Or
Well, Teen Creeps does follow me on Twitter, and that's very exciting to me.
And we've tweeted with we've talked with Teen Creeps before. On Twitter.
So if you guys let Brittany know that you've listened to it, she would die and love that. Not I disagree with you, but I think you guys do an awesome show. So
well, and I think where they were coming from, if I'm remembering correctly, because it's been a while since I listened to that episode, is their guest who always guests when they talk about movies is Oscar Montoya, and he's gay, and so I think he was talking about how at that age, because your sexuality, you're still figuring it out. You do this weird thing where you idolize other guys because you're not quite aware that you're in love with them yet, or highly crushing on them. And so I think he was just positing that based on his own experience of being that age,
sure,
and not quite knowing his sexuality yet. If I'm presenting it wrong, feel free to correct me on that too.
It's totally plausible. It's totally plausible.
But I do.
For me, I don't see it, but I recognize that's a possibility.
It's an interesting idea.
It is.
But I do feel like the narcissistic argument actually makes a lot more sense in terms of him, and maybe that's just the perfect marriage of someone who has antisocial and somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder. I mean, that's.
Yep.
That's a couple.
And he would have been. I think he's as likely to have turned on Billy as Billy was to turn on him, and I think Billy also knew that. I think because he had this adoration for him, but I think also he was struggling with that too because once Billy hurt him and that kind of thing. We saw when Billy shamed him in that video store. When Billy stepped up on him. I think that might have been a turn. Or did he step?
It was Randy.
No, you're
wrong. He's always.
It was Randy.
Well, it's a classic. I think it is one of the things where I think Billy very much and Stu very much connect with being an alpha, and I think they don't like Randy just because he's clearly a beta. In that very where they boil everyone down,
right?
Because when you have antisocial, when you have some of these more heightened personality disorders. You kind of do boil people down to these very simplified describers. Who are they to me? And I think they probably view Randy as weak, which is why they kind of can't stand him.
When Randy is the motherfucking oracle of the story.
Yes. He is the Greek chorus of the story.
Yes.
And I think too, what I think also poses to sort of this narcissistic antisocial thing too is with Casey in the beginning, no one's going to see that they fucked around with Casey. Them playing with her and doing that weird quiz game with her, that's them just playing with their food before they eat it.
Yeah.
That is purely the delight of the chase.
Yes.
And fucking around with her. They're not torturing anyone else or proving a point by doing that to an audience.
No.
The audience is each other.
Yeah.
And themselves.
Yep. And
so that clearly, that's when you really think about it like that. When I was thinking about that watching, I was like, that is truly fucked up.
Yeah, that's a whole other level.
Yeah. Because there's no other secondary gain to that.
Yeah.
Nope. Well, other than the notoriety that'll come from staging the kills the way they did.
Yeah. True.
Which they got.
All right. So is there anything else you want to say about Billy and Stu?
Nope.
No.
All right. So we get to the treatment portion. Ooh, I haven't thought about this. What do we think about with treatment? Because I feel like Sydney's already in it, is I guess what we're all assuming and or hoping.
I mean, I think what I would honestly recommend is that whoever that Sydney has been seeing, she either continues seeing or goes back to seeing, because whoever they are did a fucking awesome job.
Agreed.
And
absolutely.
And
she clearly had a good connection, and it was a good fit with the therapist, because when you have a good fit with the therapist, that's just a really big part of being able to connect and also use and just trust, and just being able to really trust the therapist.
Right. So I guess maybe I'll operate on that on treatment. One of the things that I think we haven't hit on hard enough is I've talked about trauma treatments till I'm blue in the face, and I don't particularly feel like doing that right now, because I've also been in the midst of a trauma training lately, and rather than go that direction, what I think I want to highlight is what we're starting to get at here is that the most important factor in any therapeutic relationship is the ability to forge a meaningful, close relationship with the client. And she has that with this therapist. I'm just going to give
This
positive.
imaginary therapist.
This
Yeah,
imaginary
yes,
therapist.
we're just
100%
making
certain
it up,
exists.
and we're just sure of it. And we're just gonna go with it.
We're just going to go
with it.
like it's a fact.
I love it.
It was a fact. We don't. This is how therapists are.
This is a fact.
We have discerned this and boiled this down to the only possible conclusion.
Yes.
We're gonna go with that. That's not true. We don't do that. But yes, we do. But anyway, I think the most important factor in any therapeutic relationship that has been proven over and over throughout study after study is that assuming that a therapist is equally trained in any intervention, the most critical component that controls for whether or not the therapy is effective has shit to do with which intervention you use and everything to do with the relationship you build with the person. Mm-hmm. It has to be a safe, trusting, connected relationship where you feel like that person is invested in you and can foster an environment of healing for you by connecting and seeing you and helping you work through your issues in a way that makes sense to both you and the therapist, so that the therapist can understand you and communicate to you in a language that you and the therapist understand. And that is the most critical component, the relationship. So assuming you're equally well trained in trauma-focused CBT, EMDR, and prolonged exposure therapy, you can test all three till you're blue in the face, but if you aren't building a relationship with the client, it's not going to be effective. And that's why in Sydney's case, like if I were to suggest treatment for her, the most important factor I'd say is she already has a relationship with this person, because the amount of growth that she's shown is probably unrealistic, but we'll just go with it because that's the truth we've been given in the movie, is that she is showing herself to be far advanced to where I would anticipate she would be. And whoever's doing that job is doing a great one. And I would recommend that she return to that person immediately. I mean, they would probably benefit from going through a group debriefing, which I feel like doesn't happen. So having someone come in, an external person, and kind of walk through that, a person who specializes in that, because they do exist. And sometimes insurance companies or agencies, staffing agencies, will bring people in to do crisis debriefings. I feel like the surviving members, which Jamie Kennedy,
Randy,
Gale, Dewey, Dad, and Sydney. I feel like having all five of their perspectives to tell different aspects of this story together would be huge. But as far as like the deep work, the individual work to be done with Sydney, whoever was doing it before should be the exact person that she goes right back to.
I think what would be tricky, what I guess I would focus on if I was this therapist that was seeing Sydney after this, is what's truly sucks, besides everything else, is that she's lost like her support systems. Yeah. Like she's lost her best friend and her boyfriend, even though the boyfriend was the bad guy. Like that was also a support for her. Mm-hmm. And so Randy still exists, thankfully. And if I remember anything about the second movie, which I haven't watched in 1,000 years, I do think Randy and her are closer going into the second movie, which makes a ton of sense. Yes. Since they have this shared trauma. And I'm sure they lean on each other a lot. And I think I would really, when she's ready, I think for Sydney, I'd really want to make sure that she's not isolating herself. Because also after something like this has happened, especially where you had sex for the first time with who you thought was your loving boyfriend, and you find out that he, like all the horrific things that he's done, I can't imagine, especially given how tough Sydney is, that she wouldn't like maybe double down on that. And then like, I don't trust anybody. Like I'm, being hyper vigilant and being really guarded. And so I think the work I'd want to do with her, other than just like the grounding work you have to do with someone after a big old trauma, a huge trauma, is how do we rebuild our support system, and how do we rebuild our ability to like let people in? I'd be very vigilant as her therapist of like paying attention to her isolation and her use of supports, and I would like probably ask like, hey, have you gotten out today? Have you seen anyone? Like, have you reached out to anybody? Are you and Randy hanging out? Like I'd probably check in with that a little bit more, because I would be worried about that for her as her therapist, that she would go totally in and just like maybe like she goes to school and then she comes home and she doesn't do anything else. Yeah. And she's very guarded. And that's what I would keep my eye on as her therapist. I have a question I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, Hannah, as the marriage and family therapist. Do you think it would be interesting? Do you think it would be, would it make sense for like her dad and her to maybe go to therapy together to do trauma work?
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking of them in terms of, well, a couple of different things, because it also seems clear in some ways that her and her dad maybe haven't talked a lot about the relationship that her and that her father and her mother had together. Mm-hmm. And that there might be some questions that need to be answered for Sydney, and that I think that also helping them build their own narrative together, I think would be really important in terms of continuing to kind of like continue to have their bond, and also to really help them heal and move past this in a way that is healthy for both of them. Because I think in a lot of ways, you're absolutely right. I think it would be very hard to not internalize everything and to just be like, I don't need anybody. I don't need to do anything, and just being done with it. So I do think, I was actually thinking of that. I do think that I would want to have them together in session, like for a while, probably, just to kind of, and then also just to talk about the regular ramifications of what they've both experienced. I mean, on the anniversary of the death of their wife and mother, like they were almost both killed.
Yeah.
I mean, that in and of itself, experiencing that and seeing each other in those moments, like I feel like you would be remiss as a therapist to not pursue having them be together in like a healthy way to debrief and to reform the narrative around what has happened to their life. And maybe like, I also see this family moving. I see this family getting the fuck out of this town, because also after losing so many people, it would make a lot of sense that they would want to go somewhere where they were maybe literally anywhere else than where they are.
Yeah.
At the same time. So
and something I want to add to that is that I think you're absolutely right that like you'd be remiss to miss that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
To have them together, and like the value of that is important. Like another thing that's important to understand about trauma therapy too is that family therapy for trauma and with the intent to resolve the trauma is a totally different thing than trying to rebuild and repair the relationships to pursue the healing side and the post-traumatic growth that we talked about earlier. Family therapy for trauma processing is like more considered an ancillary or like kind of like support to that. But what you really is especially important is getting people on their own too, well, so they have the chance to do both.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, it would be like everyone's in individual therapy. Sydney and her dad are together in family therapy. And then maybe they make a support group or group therapy with the people.
Absolutely.
Either they do it separately in like support, like in like group therapy of like other trauma groups, or they even have like one together as a support group.
Right. But missing that to do the real like most important parts of it that needs to be done on their own with someone helping them get into the ability to get into interoception, which is focusing on what's going on inside of your body and focusing on calming yourself down and getting into calm, relaxed muscle body while facing the traumatic memories. It will not move without getting into that. And many things can create that. Hearing the story multiple times, so you desensitize to it. Hearing it from different angles, so you start to piece the fragmented memories together, so that it becomes a complete picture. So that you can run through the whole thing from multiple perspectives and go like, "Oh, okay, I understand what happened here." Is all so vital and important. But trauma is complicated. It's very complicated, and the way it impacts you is just innumerable, and it often takes a lot of different ways to go through, but you have to do the individual work as well as the group and family things, because you're not just talking about completing a trauma treatment where you're getting past this trauma and trying to reach that post-traumatic growth. You have to reforge and rebuild everything. And everybody that's gone through this particular event has lost so much that they haven't even realized yet by the end of this movie, because the movie is just like, oh, Billy's dead at the end.
Yeah, like
And Gail's just doing her news report, like
it's no big deal. Fucking blood on her face, like
Not a thing.
not a thing. That would not. That's just
Not a thing.
That's insane. So I think that would be what I would want to do as a marriage and family therapist, because I do feel like a lot of times family therapy is not something that people think of in terms of healing trauma, in terms of, to be perfectly fucking honest, a lot of shit. Like, family therapy can be very helpful just in terms of helping repair the connection of the family, helping having an entire narrative around what has happened, and how really important it can be, and also how effective it is in terms of having a couple of sessions where they really feel connected to each other can heal some things very quickly. Mm-hmm. Again, not that they won't still have to do individual work, but I have experienced multiple times, and I would say more often with couples, where there will be like 1 or 2 sessions that really help the people feel more connected to each other and understand each other more. And then after that, sometimes things can just go really fast, and it's like, okay, now we're kind of ready to do all of the other parts. And so I guess mostly what I'm saying is that family therapy is different than individual therapy in a lot of different ways, but it also can be very helpful and is something that I wish more people were more interested in doing and or just had the access, because the other part is having, everybody in the family has to be there. And so that's also another barrier to family therapy in and of itself.
I mean, I think you're making a good point. Is I think a lot of people think of family therapy as there has to be like a problem within the family, or a conflict, or like something's wrong with the family to go to family therapy. Yeah. And it's not always. Sometimes it's just because you have a common goal as a family.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And in this situation would be healing from this trauma. Yeah. Well, all right. So we're going to slip into final thoughts, y'all.
Final thought. I feel like Brittany is much like, you should probably go last on this one, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hannah, do you want
I'll go first.
You want to go first? Okay.
Yeah, sure. I don't remember when I saw this movie for the first time. I feel like maybe at the movie theater, actually. Ooh. But I really like it. It's actually kind of just a really fun, silly movie in some ways, even though I feel like we've been talking about it so seriously. But I really enjoy it and really enjoy that for at that time in movies in general, having that many women being front and center in terms of taking care of themselves, in terms of not leaning on someone else, is pretty powerful. I mean, just in terms of the time period of like having Sydney be able to, take care of herself, even the way that Tatum responds in some ways. Like, I know the way that we talked about it, but any way where they're not just screaming for help for some man to come and help them. So just kind of in general, I think that's one of the things that I really like about it. But it's a fun movie, and I'll definitely probably watch it more.
Mm-hmm. So I was, my final thought, like, I had a different reaction to this movie than I remembered, because as I'm watching it now and the special effects and things that were used, I was like, wow, this lost so much effect. Because in 1996, I was 11. And watching this, then, it was scary, and like the whole scene with the answering the phones and the phones ringing, and just the way people would even treat phones. Like, well, someone's calling, you got to answer it. Now you look at your phone and you're like, nope. Yeah. Because I think this movie is responsible for caller ID. # called it. Because you look at the phone and go like, nah, fuck that.
Yeah.
It's coming from inside the house.
Well, it's just the act of like, you have to answer your phone or it's going to keep ringing.
Right. Or it's going to keep ringing. You'll never know who it is, or they'll leave maybe the voicemail, the answering machine. Sorry, I'm trying voicemail is trying to come on my head, but that's not what we called it in 96. It was the answering machine.
Yeah, put that on that cassette, baby.
Right, on that little tape. Like, and if somebody left something, you'd have to try to figure out where it is. Like, delete, erase. Mm-hmm. But like physically erasing magnetic tape. But anyway, I digress. The movie didn't hold the same effect for me as it did. So like I still appreciate the campiness that they managed to work into it and like the humor that went into the black comedy of Scream that went to it.
When she's in the grocery store and she closes the freezer door, and in the reflection of the grocery store in broad daylight is the Ghostface killer. Like,
right.
Made me laugh so hard. When he's in the bushes in that one scene in the broad daylight and he just like dips out.
Right. Like I laughed so hard. I got the way they like the blatant references to like Freddy Krueger, the janitor, and like, all those things. Like I appreciate like the nostalgia of it, but like the effects it held. Of course, watching it now in my 30s is totally different than when watching it when I probably wasn't supposed to sleep over. It's totally different. But what I will tell you instead is a funny story that happened with Scream 3 is that the girl that I was dating at the time, these fuckers must have had this planned out. These other kids like, oh, we're all going to get together and watch Scream 3 because it just came out. One of these fucking kids that I didn't know was running around outside the fucking house dressed in the fucking Scream outfit, banging on doors and shit and showing up. And like me and my buddy were like blowhard broing on this and like where's the bat, where's the knife, we're gonna go outside and fight. Like,
so dumb.
It is literally the dumbest thing. Like you think like somebody is dressing up like a movie, possibly copycatting it, and you're believing that it's possibly a copycat, and you're gonna say let's go outside. So we were literally in this situation with a movie that is making fun of people for making the wrong decisions, talking about the ways that we were gonna make the wrong decisions because we were dumb teenagers.
Oh, the cockiness of youth.
And here's the thing. I was bigger than most people. I still am. I was a football player. I was stronger than most people. I ready
brag.
Like no facts.
Brag. Yeah, what are you getting
to? A real
to?
Steve, huh?
Yeah, what are you getting to, Steve?
A real Steve.
I was getting to just the hilariousness of it all, that like the way people handle these things and like the absolute complete neural incapabilities that teenagers have to like process and recognize where they are. Like it's why the teenagers get picked for the victims of these horror movies, because they just make the worst decisions. And I just like remember that story and like how funny that was in a neighborhood I didn't like was unfamiliar with, and like these kids plotted out this prank ahead of time, and then like I think two of us like sitting there like, well, fuck your prank, we're gonna fuck this person up.
Yeah.
And not realizing like, oh, this is probably a prank. Idiots. Anyway, so Scream, I appreciate it. I haven't really seen it since then, and I probably won't watch it a ton of times, but I remember why it became such a cultural phenomenon.
I mean, I love this movie. I think how I think about it has changed. I think not dissimilar to what you're saying, Ben. When I was younger, I thought it was such a good, scary movie. Like it really scared me, and it's still parts of it do, like not the way it did when I was also 11, but right. I think I grow more and more to appreciate like how well written it is, how cool Sydney is, especially now that we've talked about her to the extent that we have, and I think how fucking funny it is. Like it's almost like in your face funny, like the gags. Like it's really doing some gags and
total bits.
And I laugh at it in a way that I don't even think I was picking up on when I was a kid, because I was so like involved with the story
and the scariness.
Yes,
and, they're gonna
and just how fucking funny Rose McGowan is in this movie. The way she talks to Dewey, like I think there's a lot of, ironically, how we've been talking about, a lot of naturalistic acting in it, like the way teenagers really talk to each other, a lot of like natural funniness. That I really appreciate about it. And I do highly recommend the Teen Creeps episode where they talk about this movie. It like cracks me up and brings me so much joy. And also I think just like writing wise with this movie, like it sets everything up so perfectly. Like her dad being out of town and you don't even really think about him again until the end. Like I think it lays a lot of things out story wise that really pay off. Like it doesn't really have holes in it, which is impressive for a movie like this.
That's true. There aren't holes. Like it's all very well crafted and all comes together, and like they like make a point to do little things to make you wonder, like zooming in on the sheriff's boot, showing that the sheriff wore the same kind of boot as the killer, and like all those kinds of things. You're like, well, is he the guy? He's talking about quitting. And her dad disappeared. Is he the killer? Like all these tropes they set up for like to be able to work in the story, and then they've still managed to flip it on you. Yeah.
And even too, like showing how she puts her door against the other door so her dad can't come in. So people can't just be like, how does she know how to do that all of a sudden? Like they do a lot of good jobs like laying groundwork in this movie that pays off later. Like it is kind of, in my opinion, like a perfect movie in the sense of like, if I was wanting to be a screenwriter, I would like look at this movie for how to like do it right. But anyway, so that's my final thoughts. So let us know what you think about Scream. Maybe if you have any personal stories. I remember my parents rented it when I was way too young, and I hid in the bathroom for parts of it in our house because I couldn't handle it. So you can find us at Facebook and Instagram at Popcorn Psychology. You can find us on Twitter at popcorn_psych. And you can email us at popcornpsychology@gmail.com. We're always happy to get your suggestions. We also always appreciate any reviews and ratings you can give us on Apple Podcast. That's how, honestly, that means more than you know about how other people can find us. And we really appreciate that as well. And we see them and we read them and we screenshot them and we send them to each other. So we do see it if you are so inclined.
And we
to
talk
give us
about
one.
it and we show our spouses and
Yes.
friends and loved ones. And we definitely, it makes our day to really do that. We really do appreciate it. And that's what really helps advance us. So if you guys can find it in your time to review us, leave us a star on Facebook or a review on Facebook and review on iTunes. That helps other people find us, and it really is the best way you can help a podcast.
Thank you. And so we will sign off with that. Happy spooky season.